broadly speaking, Trump being Trump is a function of Trump being Trump. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. That's who he's always going to be. He couldn't be anything else if he tried. But there are some who believe, and it's not an invalid or unfounded theory, that Trump goes out of his way to act like an ass in order to lower the bar so far that when he acts like a normal human being for a day, much less a conventional presidential candidate, is some sort of historic achievement. And judging by the press reaction to Trump's speech this week on race and law and order, I'd say that picked up some credibility in that particular theory. Now, Trump actually did make some good points about race in his law and order speech, but they don't erase his comments on Mexicans or his foray into birtherism. In the nanosecond, Mona Charen writes in her syndicated column today, between Donald Trump's foot and mouth moments this week, just before he made headlines by announcing changes in the topless blender that is his senior campaign staff, he gave what many consider to be the finest speech of his campaign, which isn't saying much. CBS's Major Garrett gushed on Twitter, quote, having been listening since August 2015, objectively best draft and best delivered Trump speech of campaign will resonate. Byron York of the Washington Examiner, while acknowledging some of the objections from Trump's critics, thought Trump delivered a focused, powerful, and disciplined speech, focused largely on problems that disproportionately afflict Black Americans, arguing that his proposals on crime, immigration, trade, jobs, trade policies will wipe out jobs, but I digress. Education and other issues will improve African American lives more than Hillary Clinton's. And again, that's not saying much either. Now, Donald Trump is currently polling at near zero among African Americans in key swing states. Not at 10%, not at 5%. 5 to 10% is generally the range that Republicans do with the black vote. But zero. I mean, it's like 1% in or around. Now, in a normal year, Republicans struggle with this demographic, and whole books have been written about the Democrats' low, despicable use of race to stoke fear among blacks in order to be rewarded with votes, kind of like Trump has used race to stoke fear among whites in order to be rewarded with their votes. While it may shock regular readers and viewers of this channel and my podcasts and pixelated writings at politicalpistachio.com most recently, and since then at conservative remnant.wordpress.com, to see or hear these next words come out of my pie hole, there were some good points in Trump's speech. He urged African Americans to consider that Democrat policies, cities are virtual Republican free zones, have not yielded solutions, but rather more crime, more broken homes, and more poverty. Actually, crime fell even in big cities starting in the 1990s, but it remains too high. He argued that those who advance the narrative of cops as a racist force in our society, a narrative supported with a nod by my opponent, share directly in the responsibility for the unrest in Milwaukee and many other places within our country. Well phrased, especially over the last 2 years under the auspices of the communist revolutionary-led Black Lives Matter movement, which suggests ventriloquism by the speechwriter, but still credit to the candidate for agreeing to the text. You could give more credit to the candidate if he actually meant or believed a word he was saying. Now, there are a few reasons to think that this message will not resonate with black voters. Start with the fact that it came from Donald Trump. But that's number one. Number two is the venue. The speech was delivered not in Milwaukee to a black audience, But in West Bend, a suburb 25 miles away, which has few African Americans, and of the audience was nearly all white. Third, while African American voters, unlike Hispanics, women, and others, have not received much direct incoming fire from Trump's flamethrower during this cycle, they doubtless recall that one of Trump's countless forays into conspiracy mongering concerned Barack Obama's birth certificate, which again had nothing to do with where Obama was born, his eligibility to be president. It had nothing to do with where he was born, but rather were both of his parents United States citizens. And his father was not. Barack Hussein Obama Sr. was a citizen of Kenya, and therefore at the time of Obama Jr.'s birth, a British subject. That's why Barack Obama was not eligible to be president, according to the Constitution. Not that it mattered politically. Which makes Trump bringing up the same bogus point about Ted Cruz, made that all the more infuriating. And again, there were constitutional reasons why Ted Cruz wasn't eligible along the exact same template, but that's not what Trump said. He used the where was Ted Cruz born, not were both his parents U.S. citizens at the time of his birth. Now, some on the right chafe at the suggestion that all criticism of Obama is merely thinly veiled racism. It isn't even a matter of chafing, it's just tiresome. The fact that he's half black protects him, exempts him from all criticism. Too bad Trump can't get the same deal out of his Cheeto-dusted skin, as thin as it is. But birtherism is probably just that. Need more? A couple of weeks ago, Trump suggested that that when he loses in November, it will be due to irregularities in certain areas. He then accused Obama repeatedly and unsarcastically of being the founder of the Islamic State. By hiring Steve Bannon of Trump Bart, the candidate is signaling that the alt-right, national socialist, protectionist, loutish fringe is going to pilot this ship straight into the reef and off the cliff. Now, even supposing that Trump misspoke or was misunderstood about all of the above, which he wasn't, it's perverse to imagine that blacks will not have their radar activated when Trump relentlessly derides other minorities. An attack on one minority group, Hispanics have been one of Trump's preferred targets, is threatening to all. I mean, and remember what he was doing. He based everything in race, racial identity politics, because that's, first of all, Trump is a leftist instincts, so that's what he thinks. That's how his mind works, just like any other leftist. But two, he was appealing to conservatives through the lens of the left's stereotypes of conservatives. Well, conservatives are racist, so I'm going to make my appeal. I'm going to base my appeal for conservative votes against illegal immigration on race, because that's conservatives are racist, so that's how they think. I mean, the left is incapable of not believing that everybody views everything through the prism of race, because they're obsessed with it. I mean, consider the Asian vote in 2012. If there is one minority group that ought to lean Republican, it is Asians. They have very low illegitimacy rates, little divorce, high levels of small business ownership, and are highly educated, hardworking, and self-sufficient. Yet they cast more than 75% of their votes for Obama over Romney. Could it have been the vehement hostility to immigration, or illegal immigration, telegraphed by nearly all of the Republican candidates in the primaries? Funny how touchy people can be. Now, this election, as calamitous as it will be for many fine candidates, will not have been entirely in vain if it serves to bury the idea, beloved even of many non-Trump Republicans, that the GOP can win national elections without broadening its appeal to minorities and women. This is demographics, folks. Remember Mark Stein's phrase, catch how he put it, demographics is destiny. Every precious American tradition, from religious liberty to free speech to free markets to national security, depends upon convincing more Hispanics, Asians, and African Americans to oppose the policies of the Democrats and embrace constitutional conservatism. That's the demographic reality. The percentage of the overall American population that is white is declining, has been for years now, will continue to do so. And those of minorities is going to increase. Therefore, we have to take the gospel of constitutional conservatism to Hispanics, to Asians, to African Americans. I mean, for heaven's sake, we had two exemplary, outstanding Hispanic. I'm sorry to have to use ethnic terminology here, but two, Hispanic candidates who would have been absolutely stellar, who would have wiped up the floor with Hillary Clinton in the general campaign in Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Right there for the taking. And for that matter, there was Carly Fiorina, who I'm assuming has a vagina, 2 X chromosomes. Boy, she never let up on Hillary Clinton in the primaries. She would have been a tremendous running. I mean, picture for a minute. It's a never Trump fantasy, but picture for a minute if the GOP ticket had been Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina. Because that's what it would have been if Ted Cruz had won the nomination. Cruz Fiorina. Oh, that is just that would have been like night and day compared to what we did get stuck with, or the GOP did. GOP left me, remember. It's such a difference that it's probably borderline addictive for me to even think about it. Even immigration restriction is possible if not framed in an odious way, if not cast in racial terms, but in terms of the rule of law, in terms of Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, because that is the issue, ladies and gentlemen. That's the issue. And how did Donald Trump phrase it? How did he cast it? As one of race. Mexicans are criminals and rapists. And why did he do that? Because he has leftist instincts. He is a leftist, and that's what he thinks conservatives think. The conservatives are all racist, so if you cast it in racial terms, that will win conservative votes in the Republican nominating process. And the biggest disappointment of the entire primary season is that calculation proved to be correct. So now, in the future, you're a constitutional conservative. You make the argument against illegal immigration as one of national sovereignty and border control, and a country that can't control its borders is a failed state, national security, and no one's going to listen to us because, hey, it's really motivated by race, and your party nominated Donald Trump. So you got no credibility. Shut up. All the years of progress, painstakingly earned, every last inch gained, out the window. I mean, I don't think I don't think even never Trumpers, I don't think even we fully realize the damage that Donald Trump has done to the conservative movement, much less the Republican Party. It will take years, decades to overcome. And I didn't think we had that kind of time. I mean, this was the year when it would have been relatively easy to do. Hillary Clinton is Imelda Marcos in a pantsuit. The nomination of Trump was the greatest act of self-sabotage by a political party in American history. The Republican Party might not survive it, but if it does, it will be because it stopped signaling that it was the party of white people and got back to being the party of Lincoln. But I don't know how such a signal can be sent given that Donald Trump is the party's presidential nominee. But here's what's really infuriating about this Trump race speech. It's being depicted by his supporters as though no Republican ever gave any speech of its kind. Now, this is totally new. This is uncharted territory. Bold, impressive, historic. No Republican candidate has ever made such an appeal before. Actually, there have been plenty of Republican candidates, presidential candidates at all levels, who have made this appeal. These very same concepts before. This is nothing new. And yet supposedly Trump is the first one to ever do it. I mean, Trump's pitch to black voters, as Leon Wolf says today at Red State, is vote for me and all your wildest dreams will come true. Funny, it sounds like the con that he's been playing to the Republican electorate and now to the general electorate as well. To much less effect. And African Americans are simply, having been spared up to now, have now been thrown into the same cesspit along with the rest of us. Now let me say this for Trump's approach. I guess it can't hurt him. Why do I say that? Well, because Trump is getting about 1 to 2% of the black vote right now. In fact, he is in 4th place behind Gary Johnson and Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton among black voters. So it's pretty much impossible for any candidate from either of the major parties to get under 2% of the vote from literally any group. Therefore, I assume that Trump cannot possibly do worse. But can he do better? Well, Trump tried his "I'm the only one who can fix it," and not only that, "I will make all your wildest dreams come true" speech on black voters, whom you would think would have recognized this con, given that it was pulled on them 8 years ago by Barack Obama. The difference, of course, being that Barack Obama is half black and Trump is not. Here's a quote, another quote from Trump's race and law and order speech. "Look at how badly things are going under decades of Democrat leadership. Look at the schools. Look at the 58% of young African Americans not working," Trump added. "It's time for a change." A change? "What do you have to lose by trying something new?" he said to his white audience. "I will fix it. This means so much to me. Yeah, some of my best friends are ... And I will work as hard as I can." Remember, Bill Clinton used to say, I worked harder than any time of my entire life. Nobody was more and Barack Obama is much prone to this kind of hyperbole as well. "I will work as hard as I can to bring new opportunity to places in our country which have not known opportunity in a very long time. We cannot make America great again if we leave any community behind. Oh, no child left behind." So now he's borrowing from Bush 43, huh? "I will not rest until every child of color," or colored child, "in this country is included in the American dream. Jobs, safety, opportunity, fair and equal representation. This is what I promise to African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and all Americans. Close quote. Then afterwards, Stephen Bannon came out and did a sweet dance while wearing a Vote for Trump t-shirt and snow boots, and everyone present applauded wildly, indicating that they would all vote for him in November for sure. Well, I don't know if that last part actually happened. It's getting harder to tell fiction and showbiz from reality all the time in this campaign. See, the problem with Trump's message is the conceit of his belief that he's the first person to make this point or this claim. He's not. It's not especially persuasive for a number of reasons, chief among them being that even if Trump gets elected, which he won't, the Democrats are still going to run all these cities and states that he refers to. Trump's capacity to make them better extends pretty much to throwing more federal taxpayer funding into the pockets of the corrupt Democrats he is blasting, which is a variation on what Trump has been doing for years anyway. And why is even a faux Republican president needed to do that when you think Hillary Clinton isn't inclined to do that very same thing? In other words, why get it from a Republican pretender when you can get it from the real thing? A Democrat, a fellow Democrat. So again, the bar has been lowered so much that he gives a speech like this and is hailed as some unprecedented achievement that no Republican president in the past has ever done. It ain't true, folks. This is what we mean by demanding better. We deserve better. We need better. But instead, you nominated Donald Trump. In this case, your mileage will not vary because all your tires are going to be flat. The good folks over at legalinsurrection.com give us several examples, or at least one example, of how Trump's speech today and the subject of it were far from the GOP's first foray into racial outreach at the presidential level. Now, let's put aside the question of how much difference a speech can make and treat the question of whether this sort of outreach in a speech is unusual. And it isn't. And what is that assertion based? Memory? Not accurate memory. I mean, after all, memory can play funny tricks. That's why Google is our friend. A very quick search reveals that both Mitt Romney and George Bush reached out in a similar way during campaigns, as did Rand Paul in this very cycle. Now, Neocon, is that right? Is that the writer's handle? Neocon, okay. Close enough. Didn't try to research all the Republican presidents and candidates of the last 50 years, but just now he chose one and looked for Gerald Ford, just to pick one at random, speaks to black community. And up came this from domemagazine.com. This is Gerald Ford in the 1976 campaign. Quote, in the months after he assumed the presidency, Ford actively presented his views on domestic policy, including civil rights and urban affairs, to African American organizations, including the National Baptist Convention and at forums such as the White House Conference on Domestic and Economic Affairs. He used a 1975 speech at the NAACP National Convention to talk about the adverse impact of the recession and inflation on low-income workers and the poor. He promised that his administration's policy of fiscal restraint would not mean turning the country's back on problems of employment, housing, education, transportation, and health care. Meanwhile, the president reached out to African American audiences to sell his policies. For example, his 1975 speech to the predominantly black National Newspaper Publishers Association addressed the economy, crime, taxes, unemployment, and voting rights. Blacks in our society have too often been mentally segregated by some thinker planners who acted as if blacks did not have the same expectations and problems as other Americans, he said. I promised at the very beginning of my administration to be president of all the people, and I am keeping that pledge. The administration will not slice off a small portion of the pie and say, this is enough for the 25 millions of Americans who are black, close quote. There's a good deal more at the link at, what was that again? domemagazine.com. The whole thing is an excerpt from a book entitled Presidents and Black America, a documentary history, which might correct the record on misconceptions about a lot of presidents. Bottom line is, the truth about the GOP and the black community in recent years is that the perception of Democrats' good GOP had by the black community has been entrenched and is probably not amenable to a speech. And there have been way more than just one such speech, and it really hasn't made much of a difference, which tells us that speeches, at best, are the beginning of that process, not the be-all and end-all, which means Trump's speech, run-of-the-mill as it is, but even if it was historic, which it's not going to resonate because it came from Donald Trump, for crying out loud. The media, the media, has long been engaged in promoting the idea that Republicans ignore black people, or more along the lines of Republicans hate black people. It's said often enough by the left that I don't think the right needs to repeat that falsehood. And yet the right has all too often accepted that characterization by the left without questioning it much. But this is far first such speech offered by a Republican presidential nominee. So it's not historic. It's a pity it's not even heartfelt on Trump's part.